welcome to my channel. This is my first video and it felt fitting to begin with the new booktuber tag. I felt like this video would do a really good job of giving an idea of who I am, what my content is going to be looking like, what the sort of books I like to read are like. So if anyone was interested in the things that I talk about in this video, it'd be a great idea to subscribe and follow along on this journey. A few months ago, I read Sisters of the Yam by Bell Hooks. May she rest in perfect peace. The book is all about the impact of racism and sexism on Black women's emotional well-being. In the book, Bell Hooks talks a lot about having self-affirming images or ideas or conceptions in your life. And because of that, I decided that I wanted to undertake somewhat of a journey, a re-education, as I like to call it. This is a little bit of background. I recently left my job. I was working as a lawyer and I decided that I'm really interested in academia. And so for the next few months, my plan is to spend lots of time reading, going through this process of re-education and really understanding a lot more about the world, a lot more about myself. And I'm aware that not everyone has the privilege of spending hours every day reading. So I really wanted to be able to share what I'm learning and what I'm reading with other people. That is a difficult question. I think everyone comes into BookTube with a very unique perspective and understanding. I can say for myself, I identify as a woman, I identify as a person of color, I identify as someone from the African diaspora. So I just think overall, I bring a very unique lens and perspective to the BookTube community. I think that this channel is going to force me to read books in a much more intentional way. I just finished reading How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler. Adler talks about the idea that we're essentially bombarded with information, flooded with information, but it's actually resulted in a lack of understanding. And I think I could say that myself. It was all about quantity over quality. I wasn't intentionally reading the books. I wasn't really sitting and reflecting on what I'm reading and what I'm learning. I think it's going to really force me to grapple with books a lot more. I think I'm going to develop the skill of reading to a completely different level than I've ever done before, and I'm really excited about that journey and that process. The first part of my answer to this question is a quote from James Baldwin. He says, "You think your pain and your heartbreak are unprecedented in the history of the world, but then you read. It was books that taught me that the things that tormented me most were the very things that connected me with all the people who were alive, who had ever been alive." The second reason I love reading is that I love seeing how authors use language and words. Two novels that come to mind on this point are Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov and The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Both of those books, I remember reading them and just being astounded at the author's use of words and language. And I hope one day to be a writer. And so I think reading good books is going to be a study in the art of writing well. I can't remember which one came first. Definitely Harry Potter, and then Jacqueline Wilson wrote a bunch of children's books and I loved those and completely devoured them. So I'm curious to know whether having a channel like this has changed their love of reading. So there are different views about hobbies and work. Some people believe that the key to work is finding work that you love doing and finding ways to make money out of things that you already enjoy. Then there are other people who have said it's good to have work and hobbies separate, and when you're trying to find a way to make money out of your hobbies, it sort of removes the natural love you have of the thing. So I'm curious to know whether people who have booktube channels have found it's affected their love of reading in any way. Do they love reading more now, or do they find it more of a chore and they found that they liked it a lot more when they weren't monetizing their hobby? I think the biggest challenge, especially if I'm doing reviews of books, will be letting go of my need for perfection. I know people in the hip hop community would always make fun of Dr. Dre because it took him so long to bring out his second album, but I completely understand that sort of like need for perfection and never being able to let something go because there's just a little bit more you can do. There's another sentence you can add here, and I know that that is naturally how I am as a person. And in work, I really survived as a lawyer because you have deadlines. I did a lot of court, so you have court deadlines and you have to get things done by a certain time. I worry that without having that sort of pressure, I'm going to struggle to actually let things go and put them out in the world. But I'm hoping that if I can sort of get into the habit of trying to stay consistent, I'll be able to be okay. I would also say I think I'm going to struggle with reviewing books. I tend to not know how I fall on certain things, which is funny because so much of my job was about arguing a particular point, but it's much easier to argue a point that you've been given, like you're arguing your client's position, as opposed to coming up with your own idea of like what is right or what this book means or what is truth. Ooh, got deep there. So I think I'm gonna really struggle with coming to my own conclusions and reviews on books. I honestly can't remember, so I would say as early as I probably could read words, I began reading books. I honestly read anywhere and everywhere, and I read physical books, ebooks, and listen to audiobooks. So literally anywhere I can, I like to read. But I would say my favorite places to read tend to be in nature. I love reading in parks, botanical gardens, being surrounded by trees and flowers. It's my happy place. I also love reading on public transit. I love taking buses or trains. If you live in Canada, I love taking the Via Rail and just reading for hours. It's so calming to me. And I also love reading on my couch. I have a big pink velvet couch that I love to sit and read and lounge on. So when it comes to fiction, I'm less particular about genre and more interested in style. So I like writers who are very clear, and I tend to like books that have very well-defined characters. I think character development is actually what's most important for me when it comes to a book. So when I think of authors that I really enjoy someone like Tolstoy, who has these mammoth books that have extremely well-developed characters, where it's just amazing how he's able to create so many different characters that just all seem like real people, being able to get into the psyche of what it is to be a human. I also do occasionally like books that the characters might not be very well developed, but the ideas in the book are very interesting. And for that, I think of Dostoevsky. That's kind of a reason I don't like Dostoevsky quite as much as Tolstoy, because I find Dostoevsky is really interesting because all of his characters sort of are taking on different philosophical positions, but I don't find the characters particularly well developed themselves, but the concepts that they talk about, the ideas that they talk about, I find really interesting. All that to say, I like books that have strong characters. It's similar with the films and shows that I like. If you're a big watcher of television, some of my favorite shows are The Sopranos, Succession. I'm just really interested in people, and so I find books, films, television shows that have really well developed, thought through characters are what tend to keep me coming back again and again. When it comes to fiction, I do plan to be reading mainly sort of the classics and the great books. I tend to like to read older literature. Life's big questions, I feel like it's dealt with a lot more in older books than newer books, or at least in the quote-unquote classics. That tends to be a lot of the fiction that I read a lot of. I am trying to read a little bit more modern day, contemporary, whatever word you want to use, fiction. When it comes to nonfiction, I really love philosophy, so I plan to be reading a lot of philosophy books on this channel. I also have like a particular interest in autobiographies / memoirs. I just find it really interesting to look and see how people choose to recount their own lives or their own history to other people. There's a line in Notes from the Underground that I think is really telling. What I really wish to put to the test is, can one be perfectly honest with oneself and not be afraid of the whole truth? Apropos of this, I would point out that Hayne claims that true autobiographies are almost impossible and that a man will most certainly lie about himself. So, for that reason, I'm really interested in autobiographies. I just find them fascinating. I would add, if you're bored and looking for something to do, go and read Trump's books. They are a treat. Thank me later. So I plan to do a proper video later showing my bookcases, but I just wanted to give you an idea of them right now. So my bookcases are actually organized by time period. It's a little bit out of order at the moment because it makes it very difficult to take things out and put things back in. Up top, I have a lot of Greek classical literature. So you have Homer, I have some works of Plato, Aristotle, etc. And then we're sort of progressing through time, got some Dante, then I have a lot of political philosophy. Then I have more literature here, so things like Charles Dickens, a lot of Dostoevsky, some Tolstoy. And then moving down here, we have more literature. It's back here. Yeah, some more Tolstoys over there. Some more literature, moving to the 1920s, you have Camus. Then sort of moving to my more contemporary literature. A lot of these are the Penguin modern classics. So this is sort of like the 60s onwards. And then here I have more contemporary stuff. So again, I just want to say that I don't think my bookcase is necessarily reflective of the sort of literature I read, because I actually read a lot of things by ebook, borrowing things from the library. But yeah, I'll do a proper sort of bookcase tour eventually. I kind of want to get rid of things and reorganize it so the bookcase reflects who I am a little bit better. But that was the last question, so I just wanted to make sure I did a quick video of that.